Engaged with a tangle of server wires, I heard my name. Eleanor Vance, project architect, final stage. It wasn't said with admiration. It was Dale, the operations director, ticking off names in the Monday status meeting like he was inspecting stale inventory. 3 years. 3 years of lost weekends, grueling debug sessions, and holding this ambitious project together with sheer will and an industrial supply of coffee. Now, I wasn't even a footnote in my own project's concluding review. That's when the truth solidified. I wasn't a valued asset. I was a disposable component, to be burned out and cast aside the moment my utility waned. As a Virgo, I thrive on precision and thoroughness, so I hadn't started this role with naive dreams of glory. I started because I believed in the work, a multi-site logistics automation system designed from the ground up for unparalleled scalability, accuracy, and endurance. The kind of system capable of revolutionizing warehouses nationwide. What I hadn't grasped then was corporate's eagerness to seize my creation and parade it as their own triumph. They relished the accolades, the client praise. They just didn't value me. Dale droned on about budget efficiency while my boss, Maxwell, a man whose leadership seemed measured by smirks and self-congratulatory online posts, leaned back, already scanning for the next big deal. Our eyes met as I gathered my notes. He gave me that familiar look, the "don't get too comfortable" glare. I received the official news 2 days later. No private meeting, no handshake, just a calendar invite, transition discussion. Maxwell, true to his detached Leo nature, didn't flinch. "Time to cut the deadweight," he stated, smirking as if relaying a broken coffee machine. As if 3 years of my life were a negligible figure on his spreadsheet. I smiled, nodded, and walked out. Because here's what they never grasped. While they were busy claiming credit, I was diligently taking notes. Every update, every configuration, every hardware module deployed on site, especially the core component, a single critical interface unit at the heart of the system's operational sync. My design, my build, registered under Vance Innovations Group LLC. I'd introduced it subtly during Phase 2, when their procurement team's standard vendor unit repeatedly overheated under stress. A temporary fix, I told them. They shrugged. As long as the metrics looked good for client reviews, nobody questioned its origin. They didn't log it, they didn't license it, they didn't even realize it wasn't theirs. I called it VeriLink, a silent heartbeat for a system they believed ran on corporate genius. And the best part? I held the patents, the manufacturing rights, and licensing clauses they never bothered to scrutinize. The entire nationwide logistics operation they were about to launch pulsed through my hardware, my creation. But I said nothing that day. No gloating, no threats. I simply signed the exit papers, shook Brenda from HR's cold, apologetic hand, and exited that glass office with a severance packet lighter than a lunch receipt. On the surface, I was another layoff, a downsized name on a bloated organizational chart. Internally, I was the storm they hadn't foreseen. Because VeriLink wasn't just a controller, it was leverage. The moment they attempted to scale the system without acknowledging the details, they would learn the true cost of oversight. I wasn't seeking retribution. I wasn't even angry. This wasn't about payback. This was about value. My value. And when the invoice landed in their inbox, they'd finally comprehend the price of underestimating the person who built their empire, one pulse at a time. 2 days after my departure, the press release dropped. Apex Innovations unveils revolutionary logistics synchronization system, internally developed, engineered for scale. Internally developed? I genuinely laughed. The article was ubiquitous. Industry blogs, social media, even featured in a mid-tier tech magazine. Maxwell's smug face, a true Leo commanding attention, was plastered on the cover, arms crossed as if he'd personally soldered every circuit. They hailed it as a triumph of internal innovation. No mention of the team. Definitely no mention of me. But I wasn't surprised. I'd anticipated it. Maxwell was the type to claim credit for the sunrise if you gave him enough meeting time. He loved optics, the narrative of being the visionary CEO disrupting logistics with cutting-edge tech. And that would have been fine, save for one minor, inconvenient truth. The entire system sync controller, VeriLink, was mine. And I didn't mean I worked hard on it. I meant legally, on paper, filed with the US Patent Office. Mine. 3 years prior, recognizing the fragility of the company's supply chain components, I'd started tinkering after hours. Not out of spite, but sheer necessity because their approved vendor modules overheated with minimal load. And because I wouldn't let my name be associated with a project doomed to fail on launch day. So I built VeriLink, compact, efficient, seamless. When it worked, I quietly integrated it with a nod from the hardware lead, who frankly just wanted error logs cleared. They never registered it, never documented it, never even noticed. Maxwell and his board signed off on the rollout roadmap, proudly oblivious that their crown jewel relied on a controller licensed, had they bothered to read the fine print, to Vance Innovations Group LLC. So I waited. I let them bask in their headlines, high-five in boardrooms, toast with expensive champagne, and polish the metaphorical shoes they planned to put on my head. Because I knew the clock was ticking, and VeriLink wasn't designed for generosity. At midnight on the first Monday post-exit, I launched a scheduled update through VeriLink's backend, a passive check-in. Not malicious, not illegal, just a simple handshake protocol. If they didn't respond within 30 days with a valid license key, VeriLink would begin throttling the system sync rate by 5% every 24 hours. Not enough to trigger immediate alarms or lawsuits, but sufficient to gum up operations, delay fulfillment, and spike error reports. Just enough friction to make their $50 million pilot project feel like running a marathon through thick molasses. I didn't need revenge, I needed leverage. And this was leverage with a heartbeat. By Thursday, I received the first ping, a social media message from Chloe, the finance analyst I barely remembered. Hey, Eleanor, hope you're well. Quick question, did we ever finalize asset transfer forms for your system modules? Trying to tie up some loose ends. Loose ends? I left it on read. By the weekend, friendly pings became polite voicemails, then urgent emails, then high-priority calendar invites. I ignored them all, knowing precisely how this would unfold. They wouldn't panic instantly. They'd attempt an internal fix, confident they could bypass or patch the problem. But they couldn't. VeriLink wasn't merely plugged in. It was deeply, deliberately, and exclusively integrated by me. By Monday morning, I got a text from Kyle, an old teammate still trapped in that corporate circus. Not sure if you heard, but Ops is freaking out. Sync delays are creeping in. People are blaming firmware. Dale's losing it. I simply smiled. I knew what they didn't. This wasn't a glitch. This was the cost of forgetting who built their empire. And I was just getting started. By the start of week 2, the cracks weren't just showing, they were widening. I didn't even need to check the system logs. The reports came directly to me. First, Kyle again. Hey, did you hear? They brought in a consultant from Nexus Solutions, tried patching the sync delays. Total flop, made it worse. I could picture it, some overpaid external guru poking around VeriLink's environment like a tourist attempting to decipher a subway map upside down. I built VeriLink with one thing in mind, precision. It wasn't just a hardware module, it was the brainstem of their entire fulfillment synchronization. You couldn't patch it, you couldn't swap it out, and you certainly couldn't replace it with a generic, mass-market controller. But they tried. Oh, they tried. By Wednesday, another text, this time from Leo, the friendly DevOps guy, a true golden retriever of the team. Eleanor, they're running diagnostics on all sync controllers. Warehouse ops is crawling, orders delayed, clients asking questions. You didn't hear that from me. I hadn't needed to. VeriLink was performing precisely as designed. The handshake protocol continued its silent countdown, 5% sync degradation every 24 hours past the license renewal date. By Friday, they were 10 days overdue, and the system operated at 60% capacity. Warehouse operations slowed, delivery windows stretched, and clients noticed. Meridian Supply Co., one of their flagship partners, conducted a routine audit Friday afternoon and flagged a 4-hour delay on their order sync report. I heard it through Kyle, who heard it from a warehouse lead, who heard it from Dale himself. Maxwell, in his typical fiery Leo rage, flipped, threw his coffee, declared heads would roll. But here's the kicker. They still didn't get it. They still believed this was a technical hiccup, a firmware bug, a patch away from resolution. because they couldn't fathom that their redundant, disposable project lead had walked out holding the only key to their system's vitality. I started receiving direct emails now, not from HR or finance, but from Maxwell. Eleanor, need to connect ASAP regarding some lingering IP clarifications. No hard feelings, just tying up loose ends. Let me know when you're free. I wasn't free, and there were plenty of hard feelings, none of them mine. I didn't reply. Instead, I checked VeriLink's dashboard. Sync integrity holding, load balancing stable, throttle degradation now at 45%. By Monday, they'd be completely underwater. It was almost too simple. They'd constructed their entire operation on something they hadn't bothered to comprehend. Worse, they'd ensured the one person who did understand it was out the door with a smile and a severance check barely covering a week's rent. I wasn't angry.
I wasn't even smug. I was patient, like a Virgo carefully planning her next move. Because this wasn't sabotage. I wasn't trying to destroy them. I was letting them destroy themselves. And what still astounds me, even now, is that they were still seeking a workaround instead of picking up the phone and asking the one question that could have saved them: what's your price? But arrogance, an unyielding Leo trait, blinds people. They thought I'd move on, they thought I'd let it go. They believed a pat on the head and corporate merchandise were enough to erase 3 years of blood, sweat, and sleepless nights. Now, they were about to learn the most expensive lesson of their careers, because by week's end, the countdown would hit critical, and VeriLink, she wouldn't be asking nicely anymore. By the start of week 3, their silence shattered. The emails ceased being polite, no more "hope you're well" or "let's connect." Now it was immediate action required, IP licensing confirmation, urgent operational risk mitigation, contact requested. Maxwell even tried calling twice, blocked both times. I wasn't avoiding them out of spite, I was giving them time. Time to comprehend the true cost of underestimating the person who built the heart of their system. And now, time was up. Monday morning, 4 a.m. sharp. VeriLink's handshake protocol expired. The passive throttling stopped. Because now it wasn't about slowing them down, it was about demonstrating what happens when you forget who truly holds the keys. VeriLink initiated her Phase 2 routine, controlled sync halt, system-wide idle command, order queues froze, warehouse drones parked mid-route, blinking like confused toddlers whose game had abruptly ended. Inventory management went dark, auto-sorting belts ceased movement, and the client dashboards, 404 errors across the board. I didn't even need a live feed to visualize it. A warehouse floor teeming with frozen bots, operators frantically rebooting tablets, Dale yelling into a headset, and Maxwell pacing, watching his empire crumble in slow motion. By 8 a.m., Kyle texted me a photo, a loading dock overflowing with unsorted inventory, 2 managers arguing over who should call Meridian Supply Co. before the client called them. "It's a dumpster fire," he wrote, and I smiled. The thing about systems like this isn't the shutdown that kills you, it's the timing. Meridian Supply Co. was scheduled for an in-person operations audit that morning, sending their VP of supply chain, a man known for gutting entire contracts over a 5-minute delay. Maxwell must have known it too, because at precisely 9:13 a.m., my phone buzzed again. This time, not an email, a text. "Eleanor, we need to talk, please." Not the cocky, useless staff speech, not the veiled threats or empty flattery, just 2 words that spoke volumes. Please talk. But I wasn't ready to talk, not yet, because they still believed this was negotiable. I opened VeriLink's command interface and checked the logs. Everything ran exactly as designed. The system wasn't broken, it wasn't hacked, it wasn't sabotaged. It was simply compliant. Compliant with terms they never read, compliant with licensing agreements they never signed, compliant with the owner, me. And if they wanted VeriLink to awaken, they needed to accept the reality they'd spent 3 years denying. I wasn't just a project lead, I wasn't a technician, I wasn't even a former employee. I was the system's owner, and now their silent partner. By noon, Maxwell sent one final message: name your price. I stared at the screen, letting the words sink in. Because this wasn't revenge, it wasn't personal, it was business.
Cold, calculated, fair. They'd spent years assuming I was lucky to have a seat at their table. Now they understood. I wasn't fighting for a seat, I owned the damn table, and the bill for forgetting that had just come due. I let Maxwell's message sit in my inbox for exactly 12 hours. Not because I needed time to think, but because sometimes silence speaks louder than any words. By the time I replied, the warehouse was on its third emergency reboot attempt. Kyle sent me a screenshot of the floor dashboard, red error messages stacked like a digital house of cards. Fulfillment delays hit 72 hours. Client inquiries had tripled, and Meridian Supply Co. had suspended new orders pending technical review. Translation, they were one hiccup away from pulling the plug entirely. I opened a blank email, keeping it simple, professional. Director Maxwell, I wrote, attached is the licensing agreement for continued use of the VeriLink system, effective immediately upon signature and initial payment. Then I dropped the bomb. License fee, $85,000 per month, retroactive to my departure date, paid quarterly in advance, non-transferable, non-negotiable. And the final clause, failure to comply within 48 hours results in permanent system lockout and deactivation of all operational sync functions. I signed it. Eleanor Vance, CEO, Vance Innovations Group, LLC. No apology, no explanation, no begging. Just business. I hit send and poured myself a coffee. By morning, I had a reply. Not from Maxwell, but from Meredith, General Counsel. Her email was steeped in legalese, polite, yet carrying the distinct scent of corporate desperation. We believe there may have been a misunderstanding regarding the integration of proprietary components within our system architecture. We are eager to resolve this amicably and are open to discussing licensing terms that reflect industry standards. Industry standards? I almost laughed. Industry standards don't apply when the industry's heartbeat resides in a controller you don't own. I replied with a single sentence. The terms are final. The countdown continues. 48 hours. Tick-tock. By the next afternoon, I received a direct call. Maxwell. I let it ring twice before answering. Eleanor. His voice cracked like a man deprived of sleep for days. We didn't realize about the module, about you. I let the silence stretch. I want to fix this, he rushed on. We want to fix this, whatever it takes. You've got the paperwork, just don't shut us down. There it was, the shift. The same man who'd smirked at me across a conference table, calling me useless staff, now sounded like a teenager pleading not to lose car keys. I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. But this wasn't personal. I wasn't here for revenge. I was here for value. You'll sign the agreement, I stated calmly, and I'll oversee integration personally as a consultant. Independent consultant, he echoed. Correct. A 6-month contract, triple my former salary, paid up front. No NDAs, all development and tech remain property of Vance Innovations Group. I heard him swallow. And, I added, I'll need direct client access. He didn't answer immediately, but I wasn't worried. They had no choice. They built their future on my work, and now that future had a name. Mine. I'll have legal draft it, he finally said, voice flat, defeated. I nodded, though he couldn't see me. I'll expect it by morning. I ended the call before he could reply.
It wasn't about cruelty. It was about clarity. I wasn't their employee anymore. I wasn't their backup plan. I was their lifeline. And by this time tomorrow, the papers would prove it. The signed agreement landed in my inbox at 7:42 a.m. sharp. Triple my former salary, 6 months upfront, direct client access guaranteed, no NDAs, all intellectual property rights retained by Vance Innovations Group. It was everything I'd asked for, everything they never thought they'd have to give. By 9 a.m., I walked back into the same glass office where I'd been dismissed 3 weeks earlier. Only this time, I wasn't carrying a severance envelope. I was holding a contract. Maxwell met me at the door. Gone was the crisp suit, the confident smirk. He looked like a man who'd spent a week wrestling a bear and lost. Eleanor, he nodded stiffly, eyes darting to the badge clipped to my coat. It didn't say staff. It didn't even say consultant. It said owner, Vance Innovations Group.
I smiled. Professional, polite, cold. We exchanged no pleasantries. By 9:15 a.m., I was on the warehouse floor. It was chaos. Pallets stacked at incorrect terminals, bots powered down mid-route, supervisors barking into radios, managers frantically sifting through incomprehensible error logs. I plugged my secure drive into the primary server, launched VeriLink's restoration protocol, and watched the system flicker back to life. Heartbeat restored, sync integrity at 99.8%, operational flow normalized within 90 seconds. The floor exhaled like a diver resurfacing. I uttered no words. I didn't need to. The results spoke louder than any speech. Maxwell hovered behind me, anticipating some grand "I told you so" moment, a smug grin. He got nothing, because I wasn't there for that. I was there to rebuild what they'd nearly destroyed, and to prove one final point. At 11 a.m., I called a team huddle: managers, engineers, operators. I stood before them, not as an employee, not as a contractor, but as a partner. "I'm not here to patch your mistakes," I stated evenly. "I'm here to ensure this system works for your clients and for every person on this floor who's been left holding the bag when leadership failed them." No sugarcoating, no soft landings. The room fell silent, but in the back I saw Kyle and Leo and a few others, faces I recognized from years of late nights and early mornings. And they nodded, because they understood. They'd been the gears grinding in the shadows while people like Maxwell strutted on stage. And now, someone who genuinely understood the weight of their work was finally standing with them. I stayed 2 hours on site, walked the floor, listened, took notes. Not for a report, not for PR, for the next phase, one I'd be leading on my terms. Because this wasn't a rescue, this was a takeover. By 2 p.m., I exited the building the same way I entered, head high, back straight. No dramatic exit, no applause, just quiet, professional control. But before I left, I caught Maxwell watching me from his office window. I met his gaze, held it, and smiled. The kind of smile you give when you've won without ever needing to raise your voice. Because I hadn't just saved their operation, I'd saved myself from a system that tried to consume and discard me, from a culture that saw value in metrics, not people, and maybe, just maybe, from ever doubting my worth again. Some believe power means having the loudest voice in the room. It doesn't. Power is knowing your exact worth and never letting anyone forget it. Not for a paycheck, not for a title, not even for revenge. Because real power, it is silent. It is patient, and when the time is right, it is unstoppable.